Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it? Imagine flying halfway across the world, right? You're anticipating the trip of a lifetime. You wake up early, you lace up your hiking boots, and you walk for, 2 hours in this punishing 90-degree heat.
Yeah, that Mediterranean summer sun is brutal.
Oh, it's intense. You're sweating, your legs are burning, but you push through because you are about to reach the most famous, breathtakingly turquoise cove in the area. You turn the final corner, you see the water sparkling in the distance, and then you hit a physical checkpoint.
A literal checkpoint in a national park.
Right. A park ranger steps into your path and completely turns you away. And why? Because you didn't click a specific link on your phone at exactly 9 in the morning 3 days ago.
It's wild. Your ultimate vacation highlight just gone instantly.
All because of this invisible digital tripwire. So if you're planning a trip and want the honest, is it worth it verdict before you book, follow the show on Spotify or Apple. Because today's deep dive is entirely about navigating this highly restricted new reality of the French Riviera.
Yeah, and that specific scenario you just described, that is playing out every single day in the south of France right now. I mean, the fantasy of that effortless, breezy European summer.
Where you just drift from a sunbed to a cafe in a linen shirt.
Exactly, with zero plans, that's dead. The ecosystem has completely changed. For the 2026 and 2027 season, we are looking at a travel landscape that is deeply complex, heavily bottlenecked, and honestly, completely unforgiving if you just show up unprepared.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today, to unpack all of this mess. Because you, the listener, you need the honest, hype-free verdict on whether a destination is actually worth your time and your money before you pull out your credit card. So today, we are putting a massive magnifying glass on one specific city, which is Marseille, France.
It's currently the most fascinating case study in global travel, honestly. It sits at the very center of a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah, looking at the source material and the data for this upcoming season, the core tension is just wild. Because on paper, Marseille is undeniably the best value city break you can find in the Western Mediterranean.
Oh, the economics are incredibly favorable to the traveler.
Right. But simultaneously, local authorities have introduced all these layers of friction that make it significantly harder to just, show up and enjoy the city. So our mission for this deep dive is to tear this destination down to the studs.
We need to see if that cheap price tag is actually worth the intense homework you now have to do.
Exactly. So we're analyzing the ground level costs, the structural access barriers, the daily logistics, everything.
And to get to the bottom of that, we have to synthesize a massive amount of intelligence from our sources today. We're looking at a comprehensive 11-segment travel audit. It covers street-level daily budgets.
Tracing the cost of everything, right?
Yeah, from a boutique hotel room all the way down to, a local chickpea fritter. And we're crossing that data with these sweeping environmental policies and strict digital reservation systems that are literally rewriting how the city operates.
We really have to establish the context here first, because the historical narrative about the French coast has just completely flipped.
Totally inverted.
Yeah. For decades, the conventional wisdom that tourists were fed was incredibly dismissive of Marseille. The old playbook said, it's rough, it's grimy, it's this industrial port town. You were basically told to fly in, immediately rent a car, and drive east.
Drive straight to Nice or Cannes.
Saint-Tropez, exactly. Skip Marseille entirely. But now...
Well, now those polished resort towns have fundamentally altered their business models over the last few years. Nice and Cannes recognize this overwhelming global demand for the Mediterranean, and they're actively weaponizing luxury to manage it.
Weaponizing luxury. I love that phrasing.
I mean, it's true. They are purposefully pushing out budget and mid-range travelers through just exorbitant pricing. They're aggressively capping cruise ship access, and they are transforming into these highly exclusive playgrounds.
But all that displaced travel demand doesn't just disappear. People still really want to go to the south of France. And so that tidal wave of tourism is crashing directly into Marseille.
Right, but Marseille isn't a passive victim here. The city is pushing back fiercely against this overflow.
Yeah, we're seeing local residents organizing major environmental protests. They're literally blockading cruise ships over emissions.
And the national park authorities have slammed down hard caps on access to nature. So we aren't observing a price shock in Marseille. The city remains surprisingly affordable. We're observing a scarcity shock.
A scarcity shock, meaning the very attractions that justify that long transatlantic flight might simply be off limits if you fail to master the calendar and the booking algorithms. Okay, let's dissect this grand reversal first before we get into the tactical weeds of navigating fire bans or, booking hotel rooms. We need to understand the underlying mechanics of why Marseille has suddenly become the absolute focal point of Mediterranean travel.
Well, it really hinges on two pillars, right?
Mm.
Authenticity and structural economics. Nice and Cannes were essentially purpose-built as winter resorts for European aristocrats back in the 19th century.
So their entire DNA is based on catering to visitors.
Exactly. Marseille, on the other hand, was founded by Greek sailors in 600 BC. It has been this relentless, working maritime hub for over 2.5 millennia. Its economy relies on shipping, trade, local industry, not just serving cocktails to tourists on a beach.
And that structural difference is the secret to the pricing, right? Because Marseille has 1 million permanent residents living on local French wages, the infrastructure like the bakeries, the transport, the neighborhood bistros, they cannot charge luxury resort prices.
No, the local market simply wouldn't bear it.
And that's how we end up with these incredible numbers for visitors in our sources. Let's look at this. A solid mid-range hotel room is sitting between $98 and $133 a night.
Which is basically unheard of on the Riviera.
Totally. A proper sit-down restaurant meal starts near $19. A backpacker can secure a dorm bed for $25. You take a mid-range couple, and they can comfortably conquer Marseille for about $133 a day combined.
Good luck trying to do that in Cannes. You couldn't even cover the cost of a rented sun lounger and like 2 mediocre salads on the Croisette for $133, let alone a hotel room and 3 meals.
Right.
Marseille offers these world-class assets. You have museums like the Museum that rival anything in Paris. You have a legendary culinary scene and the staggering natural beauty of the Calanques. And it's all for less than half the daily spend of its Riviera neighbors.
It's the classic indie band phenomenon.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, think about it. Marseille is that raw, authentic underground band playing in a dimly lit dive bar. The drinks are cheap, the energy is electric, the crowd is full of locals. The fans love it specifically because it feels real, it has edges. Nice, by contrast, is the overpriced stadium reunion tour. You sit in a sanitized VIP section, you pay $30 for a beer, and you watch a highly choreographed show from a distance.
I take that analogy a step further, honestly. Marseille isn't just an indie band, it's a punk band that might literally jump off the stage and yell in your face.
Yeah.
And that is the critical filter for anyone considering this trip. You don't buy a ticket to a punk show if you actually just want to sit in a velvet chair and listen to classical music.
Which leads directly to the ultimate skip-if warning for you, the listener. If you look at the urban makeup of Marseille, the intense density, the graffiti, the very real stark wealth divide between the affluent southern neighborhoods and the impoverished northern districts, if someone books this expecting a tranquil escape, they're walking into a disaster.
Complete disaster. If your mental image of the south of France involves silent cobblestone streets, pristine pastel facades, people quietly sipping rosé, and a completely frictionless environment where everyone speaks hushed English, you will despise Marseille.
Right, it's not going to be that.
It will feel loud, chaotic, and jarring. It demands energy to navigate.
But let's assume our listener wants that energy. They're craving a vibrant, complex urban environment, and that $133 a day price tag has them completely hooked.
Understandably.
The next variable to solve is the calendar. Looking at the data, the specific month you choose seems to dictate not just the cost, but whether the trip is physically enjoyable at all.
The calendar is the single most powerful lever you have. It alters the entire personality of the city. The data points to May, June, and September as the optimal windows.
Let's look at the mechanics of why, because I find May fascinating. It sits on this knife edge of seasons. The air temperature is perfect, hovering pleasantly between 70 and 77 degrees Fahrenheit. You can hike without risking heat stroke.
Which is huge.
But the Mediterranean Sea in May is punishing. The water has spent the entire winter cooling down, and it hasn't had the sustained summer sun to warm back up. Our sources use the term swimmable adjacent.
Laughs, which is a very diplomatic way of saying it will shock your system. It's cold.
Very cold. But the trade-off for that cold water is freedom, right?
Exactly. In May, the limestone cliffs of the Calanque are covered in spring blooms. But more importantly, you are operating outside of the restrictive summer reservation windows.
You don't have to plan everything down to the minute.
Right. You can wake up, decide you want to hike to a hidden cove, and just go. You have total agency over your itinerary.
But the data crowns September as the undisputed champion of the Marseille calendar. Why does September outrank the spring?
It comes down to thermal mass and demographics. By September, the Mediterranean Sea has absorbed months of intense summer solar radiation. Water holds heat exceptionally well, so the sea is at its absolute warmest. It makes swimming incredibly comfortable.
And what about the crowds?
The demographic crush disappears. The French take their domestic holidays incredibly seriously, and the entire country essentially goes to the beach in August.
Everybody just shuts down and leaves.
Yeah, literally. Come September, the domestic tourists go back to work, the children go back to school, those massive crowds evaporate, and local hoteliers drop their rates to attract the shoulder season travelers.
Okay, so May and September are great. Early June offers a similar sweet spot, but the warning flags go up very quickly as the month progresses. The access windows start slamming shut. Specifically, the weekends of June 20th and 21st, and then daily from June 27th onward, require intense pre-planning for the natural sites.
Which brings us to the most hostile time to visit, July and August.
The bottlenecks and high summer sound utterly miserable based on this deep dive.
We have a confluence of three massive pressures hitting the city simultaneously. First, you have the peak influx of French domestic vacationers. Second, you have the zenith of the Mediterranean cruise ship season, where these megaships dock and dump thousands of day trippers into the historic center for just a few hours.
And third,
You have the national park authorities enforcing hard caps on the natural sites, which forces all those tourists to compress back into the urban areas.
let's translate that into street-level reality for the listener.
Yeah.
If someone only has line off in August, that's their only window. What are they physically walking into?
Okay, picture a Saturday afternoon in mid-August. The viewport, the historic harbor that serves as the heart of the city, it's ringed by these wide promenades, the Quai du Port and the Quai de Neuve.
Right.
In August, those promenades cease to be walkways. They become a slow, shuffling mass of humanity baking in 95-degree heat.
Ugh, just the thought of it.
It's intense. The tiny ferry that crosses the harbor accumulates lines that stretch for blocks. The Corniche Kennedy, which is this stunning coastal road meant for scenic drives, turns into a miles-long parking lot of idling cars.
And the economics punish you for being there, too.
Yeah.
That mid-range room we priced at $98 in May. The algorithms push that exact same room to $150 or even $180 a night on a July weekend.
Especially in highly sought-after neighborhoods like the artsy 6th arrondissement around Coeur Julien.
And the aviation algorithms are just as ruthless. A flight from the U.S. that might cost $242 return in the quiet season will easily double.
Yeah, and for European travelers utilizing budget carriers like EasyJet or Ryanair, the dynamic pricing is even more extreme. A flight from London that costs $20 in November will surge to hundreds of dollars in August.
So you are paying absolute top dollar to experience the most congested, frustrating version of the city.
Exactly.
Speaking of November, I always wonder about the extreme off-season. Winter in Marseille has to be incredibly cheap. You dodge the crowds, you dodge the heat.
You do, but you run straight into a meteorological buzzsaw called the Mistral.
Yes. I want to dig into the Mistral because it's not just a stiff breeze. It's a defining feature of life in Provence.
It is a profound weather phenomenon. The Mistral is a cold, dry, katabatic wind. When a high-pressure system parks over the Bay of Biscay and a low-pressure system sits over the Gulf of Genoa, it creates this massive pressure gradient.
Okay, so it pulls the air down.
Right. The dense, freezing air from the Alps is pulled southward, and it gets violently funneled down the Rhone River Valley. The valley acts like a wind tunnel, accelerating the air before it blasts out across the coastline at Marseille.
It reaches hurricane force speeds, doesn't it?
It frequently exceeds 60 miles per hour. It strips the warmth right out of the air. It cuts through heavy coats.
Wow.
Now, it does create these spectacularly clear, cloudless blue skies by blowing all the moisture out over the sea, but it renders the city incredibly hostile to tourism. The sea state becomes violent, which means all maritime activities, the boat tours to the Calanques, the ferries to the frail islands, and the famous Chateau d'If, they are completely grounded.
So you score a cheap winter hotel room, but you spend your entire trip sheltering in a cafe, physically prevented from accessing the water that makes the city famous in the first place. It kind of negates the purpose of the trip.
It really does. You're left with the museums and the food, which are excellent, don't get me wrong, but you lose the maritime soul of the destination.
Let's shift our focus back to that summer high season, because understanding the crowds isn't enough. The environment and the local authorities have created specific structural pitfalls. According to the audit, there are 3 major traps that can outright destroy a poorly researched itinerary.
And these are not mere inconveniences. These are definitive trip breakers.
Yeah.
The most critical is Trap 1. the Sugiton reservation system.
Right, Sugiton. This is the crown jewel of the Calanques National Park. It's that iconic image you see on every travel blog, stark, jagged white limestone cliffs plunging down into impossibly clear, vibrant turquoise water. But the popularity became toxic.
It was an ecological disaster in the making. The local authorities tracked peaks of 2,500 people per day descending the steep trails into that specific cove.
2,500 people a day.
Yes, and we have to understand the geology here. The Calanques are formed from karst limestone. It is beautiful, but it is highly susceptible to erosion. 5,000 hiking boots grinding against that stone every single day was literally erasing the landscape.
Wow.
It was destroying the root systems of the Aleppo pines that cling to the cliffs. The park was being loved to death.
So the intervention for 2026 is severe. From June 27th to August 30th, plus the weekend of June 2021 and 2 specific weekends in September, access to Sugiton is gated. You cannot enter without a digital reservation.
And while the reservation is free, the mechanism to acquire it is intensely stressful.
This is the part that blows my mind.
Right. You cannot plan this months in advance. The system dictates that you must secure your spot exactly 3 days prior to your visit.
Exactly 3 days.
Exactly 3 days. The digital window opens at 9:00 a.m., and it is a pure, frantic land grab. Furthermore, any remaining slots evaporate at 6:00 p.m. the day before.
The psychology of this is fascinating and deeply annoying for a traveler. I mean, you were on vacation to escape your alarm clock and your screens. But now you have to sit at a cafe table staring at your phone at 8:59 a.m., frantically hammering the refresh button on a government website, praying your thumbs are faster than 1,000 other tourists.
And a terrifying number of visitors simply don't know the rule exists. The trap springs when an uninformed tourist completes the grueling, unshaded hike through the scrubland, arrives parched at the entrance to the cove, and is met by a uniformed ranger asking for a QR code they don't have.
That's the scenario we talked about at the beginning.
Exactly. They are turned around, they lose half a day of their trip, and they miss the marquee attraction, all because of an information gap.
So the only defense is rigid planning. You have to build your entire Marseille schedule around that specific 9:00 a.m. alarm 3 days out.
Or you cultivate extreme flexibility. If the Sugiton window slams shut on you, you immediately pivot. You look to the Calanques, situated further east near the town of Cassis, like Port Mew or Port Pin, which operate under different access models. But that requires having a plan B ready to deploy.
Which transitions perfectly into Trap 2. Because even if you win the digital lottery and get your Sugiton QR code, the climate might just cancel your plans anyway. Let's talk about the fire bans and road closures.
Yeah, the Mediterranean summer climate creates a literal tinderbox. The Massif des Calanques is covered in dry scrub known as garrigue and pine trees. Add the high temperatures and the fierce winds, and the fire risk becomes catastrophic.
So what happens on those high-risk days?
On days designated as red flag for fire danger, the regional prefecture simply closes the entire national park. No hiking, no entry, no exceptions.
I can just imagine the heartbreak. You set your alarm, you got the Sugiton reservation, you wake up excited, and you have an automated email from the government voiding your ticket because the wind changed direction overnight.
It happens frequently. And there are secondary traps here regarding transportation, too. Even on days when the park is open, the narrow, winding access roads leading to other major coves like Sormio and Morgiou are closed to private, non-resident vehicles for the entire summer season.
To prevent gridlock.
Exactly, to prevent traffic gridlock and ensure emergency vehicles can pass.
So if you rented a car thinking you'd do a breezy coastal drive, you hit a barrier and are forced to park miles away and walk in on asphalt radiating heat.
Yeah, it's brutal. And the ripple effect of a fire ban is also profound. When the land access to the Calanques is shut down, everyone scrambles for an alternative.
Right. What do people do?
Well, the only way to see the coves on a red flag day is from the sea, because the boats are still permitted to sail. So suddenly, every commercial boat tour out of the viewport is besieged by thousands of displaced hikers waving credit cards, and those tours sell out instantly.
This just reinforces the absolute necessity of emotional flexibility. You cannot approach Marseille with a rigid, laminated itinerary in the summer. If the park closes, you need the presence of mind to shrug it off and say, fine, today is a museum day, and head to the museum or spend the afternoon getting lost in the historic alleyways of Le Panier.
Right. If you tie your entire vacation's success to one specific hike, you are exposing yourself to massive risk.
Okay, let's move from the environmental hazards to the urban realities. Trap 3 concerns the friction of the city itself. Street crime, specifically distraction theft. The data targets three major geographic zones: the main train station to St. Charles, the crowded alleys of the Noailles Market, and the dense throngs around the Viewport metro station.
Yeah, those are the hot spots.
Now, I have to challenge the severity of this because I often feel travel advisories lean toward pearl clutching. We have tourists who live in quiet suburbs, suddenly thrust into a city of 1 million people, and they interpret the presence of unhoused individuals or aggressive panhandling as mortal danger. Is Marseille actually dangerous, or does it just require baseline urban competence?
That's a really fair question. It is crucial to distinguish between nuisance crime and violent crime. The safety index for Marseille hovers around 55 out of 100, which classifies it as a medium-risk environment.
Okay.
It is grittier than a sanitized resort town, definitely, but the actual systemic gang violence you read about in the international press is highly territorial and tied to the drug trade.
Geographically isolated.
Highly isolated. The violence is overwhelmingly concentrated in the sprawling northern housing estates, the Quartier Nord, encompassing the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th arrondissement, places like La Castellane.
So a tourist looking for a museum and a bowl of bouillabaisse has absolutely zero reason to ever set foot in the 15th arrondissement.
None whatsoever. The historic center, the southern beaches, the viewport, these zones are heavily policed and generally safe from violent crime. The threat to a tourist is entirely opportunistic. It's the pickpocket.
How are these rings operating in 2026?
It is organized theater designed to hijack your attention. The most prevalent tactic right now is the fake petition scam. You are walking along the harbor, perhaps distracted by navigating on your phone or wrangling a suitcase.
Sure.
A team approaches you. One person aggressively invades your personal space, shoving a clipboard in your face, demanding you sign a petition for a fictitious charity, and they often pretend to be deaf or mute to create confusion.
They intentionally fluster you. They want you to break your stride and feel socially awkward about ignoring them.
Precisely. They hijack your cognitive load. While your brain is trying to process the clipboard and figure out how to politely extract yourself from the interaction, their unseen partner is smoothly unzipping your backpack or lifting your phone from a loose pocket. The interaction lasts 10 seconds, they walk away, and you don't realize your wallet is gone until you try to buy a coffee 20 minutes later.
So the actual physical danger is zero, but the logistical nightmare is immense. Losing your passport and your credit cards means spending 2 days of your vacation sitting in a consulate waiting room and making frantic international calls to banks.
The mitigation is entirely behavioral. You wear a crossbody bag across your chest, you do not put your phone in your back pocket, and crucially, you give yourself permission to be rude.
Yes.
If someone approaches you with a clipboard, you do not engage, you do not break stride, you just walk right past them.
Let's touch on solo female travel too, because the data flags this as a medium-risk endeavor in certain zones.
The central districts are vibrant and walkable during the day and early evening. The friction usually manifests as street harassment or catcalling, which is an unfortunate reality in many dense Mediterranean ports. The specific geographic warning is the micro-neighborhoods directly behind the viewport in the Belsens district late at night.
Because it empties out.
Yeah, the foot traffic dies down, the lighting is poor, and it can feel incredibly isolating.
The overarching lesson of Trap 3 is simple. If you are comfortable utilizing basic street smarts, you will be fine. But if the mere thought of having to actively monitor your surroundings and ignore scammers spikes your cortisol and ruins your sense of vacation, Marseille is the wrong choice.
Absolutely. So let's transition from the theory of the city to the physical reality of arriving, because the data places a massive emphasis on the first hour of the trip.
It argues that how you handle your arrival permanently sets the psychological tone for your entire stay.
It really does.
Most international travelers are landing at Marseille-Provence Airport, known as MRS, and the geography here catches people off guard. The airport isn't in Marseille. It's situated 17 miles northwest of the city center, near a town called Marigny.
That distance creates an immediate logistical hurdle. You land, you are jet-lagged, and you still have a significant commute ahead of you.
The economics of that commute offer a stark choice. You can take the official airport shuttle bus, the Navette, which drops you directly at the main train station. It's highly efficient, takes about 40 minutes, and costs a very reasonable $12.
Not bad at all.
The alternative is a licensed taxi to the city center, which will set you back roughly $58 during the day, with severe surcharges kicking in late at night.
And whether you take that $12 bus or you arrive via the high-speed TGV train from Paris, which is about a 3-hour ride, All roads lead to the same massive choke point, Gare de Marseille-Saint-Charles.
St. Charles is an incredible piece of architecture. It sits on this high plateau overlooking the entire city, featuring this monumental sweeping stone staircase, the Escalier de la Gare, that leads down into the urban sprawl below. It looks like a movie set.
It is visually stunning, but functionally it is the epicenter of the friction we just discussed. This station is the hunting ground for the distraction thieves. You're emerging from a long journey, you are encumbered by heavy luggage, your situational awareness is low because you are looking at a map on your phone, and you are exhausted.
So if you stand at the top of that monumental staircase, surrounded by the hustle of the station, looking lost and vulnerable, the city immediately feels overwhelming. The streets radiating outward from the bottom of those stairs, particularly heading into the Belsons neighborhood, are rough, loud, and chaotic. You instantly feel defensive.
Which is exactly why the operational advice is to eliminate hesitation. Do your route planning on the airplane. Know exactly which transit line you need before you step off the train.
Don't linger.
Do not linger on the plateau. Move with purpose, because the public transportation network, the RTM, which features clean metro lines and surface trams, is incredibly efficient and cheap. It's just $2 for a single ride or $6 for a 24-hour pass.
The psychological payoff for pushing through that initial gauntlet is immense. It's the moment of revelation. You navigate the metro, you emerge from the underground station at the viewport, and suddenly the chaos vanishes, replaced by this sweeping, majestic panorama.
Oh, the geography of the port is spectacular. Because it was founded as a natural harbor, the city forms an amphitheater around the water. You step out, you see a forest of white sailboat masts, you smell the salt air, you hear the fishmongers selling the morning catch on the Quai de Belge.
And you look up, and the golden statue of the Virgin Mary atop the Notre Dame de la Garde Basilica is glowing in the sun on the highest hill.
If you managed your arrival logistics smoothly, that view feels like a triumph. The scale and the beauty of Marseille suddenly make total sense.
But if you spent your first hour lost, anxious, and fighting off scammers at the train station, that lingering stress shadows your ability to enjoy the view.
100%. So with the arrival mastered, we need to address the daily reality of existing in the city. Where are you sleeping, and what is it draining from your bank account?
Right. The intelligence breaks the traveler base down into 4 distinct profiles, grading the value proposition for each. Let's begin with the budget tier. The backpackers.
The backpacker profile receives an astonishing 9 out of 10 rating.
9 out of 10. In Western Europe, finding a major cultural hub that caters to this demographic so effectively is increasingly rare.
The math is highly compelling. A disciplined backpacker can experience Marseille for roughly $67 a day.
Let's trace where those dollars go. Accommodation is obviously the largest chunk. You're looking at established, reputable hostels like Vertigo Viewport or Vertigo St. Charles, where a bed in a shared dorm runs between $25 and $35 a night.
These locations are critical because they place you directly in the safe, walkable core of the city, adjacent to the nightlife.
However, there's a very specific geographical trap for budget travelers attempting to upgrade to private rooms. The booking engines will tempt you with independent hotels, offering private rooms for $40 to $58 a night, clustered heavily around the Belsons district and the immediate perimeter of the St. Charles station.
Yeah, that's a classic mistake.
You look at the map, you see it's near transit, you see the low price, and you book it. Why is this a mistake?
It is a profound false economy. We discussed the history of Marseille as a migrant port. Belsons is a historic landing pad for newly arrived immigrant communities. It is intensely vibrant during the day, full of incredible markets, but at night, the atmosphere shifts. The streets are narrow, poorly lit, and the street-level hustle becomes much more aggressive.
So you save $20 on the room, but you purchase a daily dose of high anxiety every single time you have to walk back to your hotel after dark. It ruins the relaxed vibe of the trip. Stick to the known hostels.
Exactly. The rest of the backpacker budget is highly manageable. They allocate $18 to $22 a day for food by utilizing the city's incredible bakery culture, grabbing a fresh baguette sandwich or a cheap slice of wood-fired pizza.
They spend $6 on a transit pass.
Yep, and they build their itinerary around free cultural assets, like hiking up to the Basilica or exploring the street art in Le Panier.
The only budget buster for this demographic is alcohol. If a backpacker sits down at a prime location bar right on the water at the viewport, a simple beer or a pastis will run $7 to $9. 3 drinks in, and they have vaporized half their daily operating budget.
Right, so let's elevate to the mid-range traveler. This profile secures an 8 out of 10 rating, and it represents the absolute sweet spot for visiting Marseille.
A mid-range couple is operating on roughly $133 per person per day, so about $266 combined. They have the capital to insulate themselves from the hostel dorms, securing private rooms for $98 to $133 a night.
The geographic strategy for this budget is essential, though. They target the second arrondissement, which encompasses the historic winding streets of Le Panier, or they head to the 6th arrondissement, specifically the neighborhoods of Cours Julien and Notre-Dame-du-Mont.
Cours Julien is the epicenter of Bohemian Marseille. It sits on a hill. Every inch of wall space is covered in intricate, ever-changing street art, and it is packed with independent boutiques, record stores, and lively terraces. It has incredible energy.
But that energy generates a massive amount of noise. The gentrification of the 6th means the nightlife runs late and loud. If a mid-range traveler books a charming boutique hotel overlooking a square in Cours Julien and they are a light sleeper, they will be miserable.
So what's the move?
The tactical advice is non-negotiable. You must explicitly request a room facing the interior courtyard, away from the street, or the summer crowds will keep you awake until 3 a.m.
Okay, good tip. The mid-range food budget expands to $40 to $55 a day, which allows for a bakery lunch and a proper sit-down bistro dinner. They have flexibility for occasional taxis, and they amortize about $15 to $25 a day for paid attractions like the Museum or a commercial boat tour to the Calanques. It is a highly comfortable, culturally rich way to travel.
Now, the narrative shifts drastically when we analyze the family profile. Families receive a mediocre 6 out of 10 rating.
The economics scale poorly. For a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children, the daily burn rate leaps to between $280 and $380 a day. A one-week vacation easily eclipses the $2,000 mark before anyone has even purchased a flight. But it's not just the money, it's the sheer physical friction of the city.
Marseille is geographically stubborn. It resists families. You cannot easily stuff a family of 4 into a cramped boutique room in the noisy 6th arrondissement.
Right, families require square footage, kitchens, and washing machines.
Exactly. That forces them into the short-term rental market, typically pushing them out of the historic center and south into the affluent 8th arrondissement or near the Prado beaches, where a decent apartment runs $120 to $200 a night.
Staying in the 8th solves the space issue, but it creates a massive logistical headache. You are now isolated from the historic sites. You are entirely reliant on the public transit system, specifically the notoriously crowded Bus 83 that winds along the coast, or the tram network.
Just imagine the physical toll. You are trying to wrangle 2 exhausted children, a stroller, and beach gear onto a packed city bus with no air conditioning and 90-degree heat.
Right, yeah.
And then you finally get to the old town and you realize Marseille is built on a series of incredibly steep hills.
The data points out that families constantly underestimate their taxi budget for this very reason. Parents look at a map, see a destination is only a mile away, and attempt to walk. Halfway up a massive incline, the kids melt down, the parents surrender, and they hail a cab.
The friction wears you down. Marseille rewards teenagers who can handle the urban grit, but it punishes parents traveling with toddlers.
Which brings us to the luxury profile. They also receive a surprisingly low 6 out of 10 rating.
Yeah, the numbers for luxury travel here are substantial. We are modeling an average spend of $555 a day for a couple, scaling easily towards $600 or more. They are booking iconic 5-star properties like the Intercontinental Marseille Hotel Dieu.
The Hotel Dieu is magnificent. It is a massive, meticulously restored 18th century hospital building that dominates a hillside overlooking the viewport. The rooms start around $197 but rapidly climb past $370 a night in the peak summer season. You pair that with fine dining ranging from $120 to $180 a day, and perhaps a private skippered boat charter to the Calanques for $150.
Right, but here is my fundamental problem with the luxury proposition in Marseille. You are willingly paying Saint-Tropez prices to visit a city whose entire cultural and economic identity is built on being the gritty, working-class antithesis of Saint-Tropez.
It's a massive contradiction. You are spending exorbitant amounts of money to build a silken cocoon that insulates you from the very urban reality that makes Marseille interesting in the first place.
Exactly. The luxury veneer in Marseille is incredibly thin. You step out of your 5-star hotel lobby, and you are instantly back in a loud, chaotic, graffiti-covered port city.
If a traveler demands the seamless, white-glove, perfectly manicured environment of a high-end resort, they are simply in the wrong city. Their money would be far better deployed in Nice, Cannes, or Monaco, where the entire civic infrastructure is designed to cater to wealth.
And we must factor in the municipal taxes. The city levies a tourist tax that scales with the classification of your accommodation, ranging from 90 cents to over $5 per person per night. It is a small fee, but it adds to the friction.
Finally, we have the digital nomad profile, which earns a strong 8 out of 10. The rise of remote work has made Marseille a major hub for expats who want Mediterranean living without the Riviera price tag.
The monthly operating budget for a single nomad sits between $2,200 and $3,200. That covers a studio apartment rental at $900 to $1,400, a robust food budget of $500 to $700, blending market shopping and cafe culture, a dedicated desk at a co-working space for $150 to $250, and unlimited use of the transit network for just $45 a month.
The geographic connectivity is a massive draw, too. You have a high-speed TGV train that can put you in central Paris in 3 hours, and an international airport offering cheap flights across all of Europe. But nomads face a severe seasonal trap.
The summer housing spike?
Yep.
A landlord who can rent a studio to desperate tourists for $150 a night in August has zero financial incentive to offer a nomad a long-term lease at $1,000 a month during the summer. If you intend to base yourself in Marseille, you must secure your housing contract well before the summer heat wave hits, or you will be priced out of the city.
Let's shift our focus to the largest variable in all of these budgets: food. For many travelers, the culinary landscape is the primary justification for booking the flight.
Marseille's food scene is an incredible tapestry. It is heavily anchored by its deep maritime history, utilizing what the sea provides. But it has been fundamentally transformed by waves of migration, most notably the massive North African influence resulting from the Algerian War of Independence in the early 1960s.
And the result is a vibrant, deeply flavorful, and highly accessible food culture.
But only if you know how to navigate it. A tourist can easily spend a fortune on mediocre food if they get trapped in the wrong geographic zones.
So how do we eat like a local?
It begins with the street markets, and the undisputed king is the Noailles market.
The neighborhood is famously referred to as the belly of Marseille.
It is an absolute sensory overload. You step into Noailles and you are immediately hit with the scent of roasted cumin, fresh mint, and baking flatbreads. It feels more like the souks of Algiers or Marrakech than a typical French provincial market.
You can purchase incredibly high-quality North African spices, massive vats of cured olives, and fresh produce for pennies on the dollar compared to a supermarket.
Though, if a traveler simply needs to stock an Airbnb fridge with standard French butter and cheese, the urban core is packed with standard, highly reliable grocery chains like Monoprix, Casino, and Carrefour City.
Beyond the markets, there are specific historic culinary institutions that define the city. The oldest and most famous is the Four des Navets, a bakery that has been operating since 1781.
They bake the navette, right, the iconic boat-shaped biscuit.
Yes, modeled after the boats that supposedly brought the first Christians to Provence. They are hard, dense biscuits, heavily flavored with orange blossom water. They are an acquired taste, but a bag costs around $5, and purchasing them fresh from the historic ovens is a rite of passage.
And for a substantial meal, the historic Italian influence on Marseille cannot be ignored. The city absorbed massive numbers of Neapolitan immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and they brought pizza.
Marseille has a legitimate claim to having one of the best pizza cultures outside of Italy. The legendary spot is Chez Etienne in the winding alleys of Le Panier. It's loud, it's chaotic, they don't take reservations, and they serve incredible wood-fired pizza for roughly $14 to $21. It is the definition of authentic working-class dining.
Let's establish some baseline street prices to anchor the daily budget. If I'm walking around, what does a quick, casual lunch cost?
You can walk into almost any corner boulangerie, buy a freshly baked baguette sandwich filled with jambon beurre or camembert, grab a cold drink, and spend no more than $8 to $10.
That's great.
For regional street food, you look for panis, these rich, savory logs of chickpea flour that are fried until crispy and salted heavily. They cost just a few dollars and are the perfect companion to a cold beer.
And if you want something sweet?
Cici freggi is the local iteration of fried dough, heavily dusted in sugar, available at street stalls for around $5. A pint of local craft beer will run you $6 to $8 in a standard neighborhood bar.
Okay, I need to interrogate a very specific and highly irritating line item in the data. We have the price of a standard cappuccino listed at $3.60. But then there's a note detailing a $1.75 terrace surcharge. What is the mechanism here? Am I literally paying rent on a plastic chair?
Laughs. Sociologically speaking, yes, you are. This is a fundamental aspect of French cafe culture that just baffles foreigners. The prime real estate in Marseille, particularly the wide, sun-drenched pavements facing the viewport, is incredibly valuable. When you choose to sit at an outdoor table, you're not merely purchasing a cup of coffee.
They're purchasing the right to occupy a highly desirable piece of civic real estate.
Exactly. And the social currency of being seen in that location.
So a quick $3.60 caffeine hit inflates to over $5 simply because I want to look at the sailboats.
Precisely. By French custom, once you pay for that drink at a table, that table is yours. The waiter will not rush you. You can sit there for 3 hours reading a book, and they will leave you alone. The surcharge is the cost of that time and space.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's the tactical workaround?
It's simple. If you just need the caffeine, you stand at the zinc counter inside the cafe with the locals, you pay the baseline price, you drink your espresso, and you leave. You only pay the terrace surcharge when your objective is to sit, relax, and people watch.
That makes perfect sense when you understand the social contract. Now, we have to tackle the absolute heavyweight champion of Marseille cuisine, the dish that people travel across the world to eat. Bouillabaisse.
Ah, yes. It is the ultimate culinary paradox.
The data classifies this as the headline splurge. How does a simple fish stew break the bank?
Because it is no longer a simple fish stew. Historically, bouillabaisse was a poverty dish. It was cooked by impoverished fishermen on the beaches using the bony, ugly rockfish, specifically the rascus that they couldn't sell at the market. They boiled it in seawater with garlic and fennel.
And today?
Today, it has been elevated into an intensely regulated, highly theatrical luxury dining experience.
What does the real experience actually cost in 2026?
An authentic, properly executed bouillabaisse, served in the traditional two-course method where the rich saffron broth is served first with croutons and a garlic chili paste called roué, followed by the whole fish filleted tableside, will realistically cost between $60 and $90 per person.
That is nearly $200 for a couple, just for one meal.
It is an investment. And geography matters immensely here. You do not eat this dish in the center of town. You travel south along the coastal road to the Vallon des Oeufs. It is a tiny, impossibly picturesque fishing inlet tucked under a highway viaduct. Institutions there, like Chez Fanfan, maintain the rigid standards required to serve the authentic dish.
Which brings us to the massive warning flag, the tourist traps on the viewport.
Oh yeah. As you walk the main harbor, you will see aggressive touts standing next to sandwich boards advertising a traditional bouillabaisse for $25.
And let me guess, it's a lie.
It is a culinary lie. At that price point, the economics of fresh Mediterranean rockfish and real saffron simply do not work. You'll be served a thin, watery soup filled with cheap frozen white fish imported from the Atlantic. The operational rule is absolute. If you want bouillabaisse, accept the $90 price tag and treat it as the singular major splurge of your vacation. If you cannot justify that cost, do not waste $25 on a fraudulent imitation. Eat pizza instead.
Before we leave the culinary section, we must address the friction points of French dining etiquette because North Americans in particular constantly trip over these cultural tripwires.
Yes, the most prevalent source of anxiety is the tipping culture. In France, a 15% service charge is legally mandated and automatically included in the menu price of every item you order.
So calculating a 20% tip at the end of the meal is a waste of money.
It is entirely unnecessary. The waitstaff are paid a living wage. If the service was truly exceptional, it is customary to leave a small coin or two on the table, literally just rounding up the bill. But the American concept of percentage-based tipping does not exist here.
The second major tripwire is the strict adherence to service hours.
France does not operate on a 24-hour convenience culture. The culinary clock is rigid. Lunch service begins at noon, and the kitchen's strictly closed by 2:00 p.m. Dinner service does not commence until 7:00 p.m. at the earliest, often later in the summer heat.
If you attempt to find a hot, sit-down restaurant meal at 4 p.m. because you skipped lunch, you will fail. You will be relegated to eating pre-made sandwiches or fast food. You must align your hunger with the city's clock.
And a quick note on hydration, which is vital in the summer. You never need to pay for bottled water in a restaurant.
Right. Tap water is perfectly safe and legally must be provided for free upon request. You simply ask the waiter for une carafe d'eau, and they will bring you a chilled pitcher.
One final culinary note that I think makes Marseille incredibly welcoming. While traditional Provençal cuisine is heavily reliant on seafood and meat, the massive demographic diversity we discussed earlier, particularly around the Douai market, means that excellent, affordable vegetarian and halal options are ubiquitous. It is far easier to accommodate dietary restrictions here than in a deeply traditional rural French village.
As we enter the final phase of this analysis, we need to distill all of this intelligence into a clear verdict. We understand the financial models, the climatic risks, the environmental barriers, and the food. Now, we separate the profound experiences from the tourist traps, and we look at the competitor cities. Let's establish the definitive hits of Marseille.
The most universally praised experience is completely free. The ascent to the Basilique Notre-Dame de la Garde.
It is the defining architectural and spiritual symbol of the city. The basilica sits on the highest limestone outcrop 500 feet above the harbor. The tactical advice is to execute this climb early, around 10 a.m.
Why early?
To beat the heat, certainly, but primarily to beat the massive convoy of diesel tour buses that arrive midday and choke the narrow access roads. From that vantage point, the entire geography of the region makes sense. You see the sprawling northern estates, the dense historic center, the sprawling southern beaches, and the jagged islands offshore. It is breathtaking.
Culturally, the museum is the undisputed heavyweight.
The Museum of European and Mediterranean Civilizations. It is an architectural masterpiece designed by Rudy Ricciardi. It's a massive, dark, concrete cube wrapped in a delicate lacework concrete lattice that filters the harsh Mediterranean sun. For a $13 entry fee, you get access to world-class exhibitions, and the building itself is connected by a dizzying, high-altitude footbridge to the 17th century Fort Saint-Jean. The juxtaposition of ultra-modern and ancient architecture is flawless.
For free exploration, nothing beats getting lost in Le Panier.
It is the oldest district in France, built on the site of the original Greek settlement. It's a labyrinth of narrow, steep, ochre-colored alleyways. It was heavily damaged during World War II, but today it is a vibrant pedestrian-only zone packed with artisan workshops, cafes, and monumental street art murals.
And we cannot ignore the maritime assets. If the Mistral isn't blowing, getting on the water is mandatory.
A local ferry ride out to the Fraiole archipelago costs between $12 and $18 round trip. These are stark, blindingly white limestone islands just off the coast. One of them houses the Château d'If, the grim fortress made famous by Alexandre Dumas in The Count of Monte Cristo. It is an incredibly evocative trip.
And if you failed to secure your digital reservation for the Sugiton hike, pivoting to a commercial boat tour of the Calanques for roughly $37 is a highly efficient way to witness the sheer scale of those cliffs from the sea.
If those are the hits, we must clearly define the misses. What elements of the city failed to justify the investment of time or money?
Well, we covered the culinary disaster of the $25 bouillabaisse and the financial drain of sitting in the terrace cafes directly on the viewport. The air quality on the main court road is poor due to the relentless traffic, and you are essentially paying a premium to breathe exhaust fumes while being targeted by scammers.
I want to focus on the beaches, because this is a massive point of confusion for tourists.
It is the greatest misconception about Marseille. People hear south of France and assume they're getting the sweeping, natural sandy bays of the Atlantic coast. Marseille's primary urban beaches, the Plage de Prado, are man-made. They were constructed in the 1970s using the earth and rock excavated during the construction of the city's subway system.
They are essentially civic engineering projects.
Exactly. They are highly functional, they have great facilities, grassy parks, and they are vital for the local population to cool off in August. But they are not romantic. They are not pristine, idyllic postcard beaches. If you build your entire vacation around the fantasy of lounging on a perfect natural beach all day, the Prado will deeply disappoint you.
And, to reiterate the logistical warning, engaging with any unofficial transportation at the St. Charles station is a guaranteed way to get financially exploited. Always utilize the official taxi ranks where fares are metered and regulated, or rely on the municipal transit system.
Let's address the final piece of the puzzle, the alternatives. If a listener has absorbed all of this data, the sheer stress of the 9:00 a.m. Sugiton booking lottery, the requirement for constant vigilance against pickpockets, the oppressive heat of August, the complexity of the geography, and concluded that this level of friction ruins the concept of a vacation, where should they redirect their capital? We have two primary competitors. Let's start with alternative one.
Nice.
Nice is the dominant alternative. It occupies the same stretch of coastline, it benefits from the same climate, and it features an incredibly efficient, modern international airport located right on the edge of the city.
But the urban philosophy is entirely opposite to Marseille. Nice is designed down to its pavement stones to accommodate visitors.
The Promenade des Anglais is the perfect example. It was literally financed and built by wealthy British expats in the 1800s, specifically so they could take leisurely, unimpeded walks along the sea without getting their boots muddy.
That historical DNA defines the city today. Nice is exceptionally polished, heavily policed, and feels deeply safe. The beaches, well composed of large, smooth pebbles rather than sand, stretch for miles directly in front of the city center. You have effortless 20-minute train connections to the absolute pinnacle of global wealth in Monaco or the quiet luxury of Cap Ferrat. It requires absolutely zero urban street smarts to navigate. You just show up and relax.
But the financial penalty for that ease is severe.
It is a massive premium. We established the baseline mid-range daily spend in Marseille at $133 per person. In Nice, executing that exact same quality of trip, a nice private room, a bakery lunch, a sit-down dinner, pushes the daily burn rate to between $170 and $200. The hotel sector in Nice routinely prices 20% to 40% higher than Marseille across all tiers.
So the decision matrix is clear. You choose Nice if your primary objective is a stress-free, aesthetically pristine environment, and you possess the budget to finance that luxury.
But you must accept what you sacrifice. You lose the incredible depth and diversity of Marseille's culinary scene. You lose access to the raw, rugged wilderness of the Calanques. You lose the cutting-edge cultural weight of institutions like the Museum. And most importantly, you lose that electric, unpredictable, deeply authentic energy of a real, working city.
Let's look at alternative 2, which shifts the geography to Italy, Genoa.
Genoa is a fascinating comparative study. Structurally and historically, it is the Italian twin of Marseille,
It was a massive, dominant maritime republic.
but global naval superpower. And it retains that heavy, slightly gritty, industrial port city character. It boasts one of the largest and most intricate historic medieval centers in all of Europe, a labyrinth of dark alleys called the Calanques, which open up into stunning palatial squares. And crucially, it operates on a value pricing model.
The economics are highly favorable. A mid-range stay in Genoa costs roughly $110 to $135, putting it directly on par with, or even slightly cheaper than, Marseille. And the culinary argument is immense.
It is the birthplace of pesto, the capital of Ligurian focaccia. The food is phenomenal.
Who should pivot their itinerary to Genoa?
A traveler who craves the authentic, slightly rough around the edges vibe of a major historic port, but who specifically desires the immersion of Italian culture, language, and cuisine. Genoa also serves as a highly efficient, cheaper base camp for executing day trips down the coast to the famous and wildly extensive villages of the Cinque Terre.
The drawbacks.
You lose the topographical uniqueness of the Calanque. Genoa is hemmed in by steep mountains, but it does not have an equivalent natural wonder sitting right on its urban border. Additionally, from a purely logistical standpoint, flight connections from major hubs in the US and the UK are generally far more robust and frequent into Marseille than into Genoa's smaller airport.
We have dismantled the financial models, mapped the optimal calendar windows, exposed the environmental and urban traps, audited the food scene, and weighed the competitors. Based on the totality of this intelligence, what is the final, uncompromising verdict for the listener who is staring at their screen, credit card in hand, trying to decide if Marseille 2026 is the right move?
The definitive verdict is, book carefully, but book boldly. Marseille remains a genuinely magnificent standout city break. It is structurally engineered to reward the value-driven, food-first, culture-hungry traveler, especially if that traveler has the tactical discipline to execute the trip during the shoulder season windows of May, June, or September.
But the caveat is massive.
The caveat is the entire foundation of the trip. The success of this vacation is entirely dependent on your willingness to do the unglamorous homework. You must accept the reality of the digital access caps, setting your alarm to secure that Sugiton reservation exactly 3 days in advance. You must accept the reality of the climate, building flexibility into your schedule to survive the fire bans and the mistral winds. And you must accept the reality of a dense, complex urban environment, deploying baseline vigilance against opportunistic crime.
If you master those logistics, the city unlocks itself and the value is unparalleled. But if you ignore the warnings, if you attempt to drift through Marseille with the lazy, unplanned mindset of a resort tourist, the city will punish you. It will mutate into a hot, defensive, and deeply frustrating ordeal.
That is the defining truth of the destination. The staggering financial value is undeniable, but the effort required to extract that value is steep.
It brings us full circle to the indie band analogy. The music is brilliant, the tickets are cheap, and the energy is unforgettable, but you have to know how to navigate the mosh pit or you're going to have a terrible time.
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.
As we conclude this audit, I want to leave you with one final structural dynamic to monitor. We have spent an hour detailing how Marseille is acting as a sponge, absorbing the budget-conscious travelers and the massive cruise ships that are being systematically expelled by the luxury policies of Nice and Cannes. We have documented how Marseille is responding to that pressure with its own strict access caps, gating off the Calanque and restricting movement.
The provocative question moving forward is one of urban evolution.
Right. The Butler tourist area life cycle model suggests that destinations inevitably change to accommodate the demand they attract. As the global tourist pressure on the Mediterranean continues to intensify, and as Marseille implements increasingly sophisticated, restrictive management systems to cope with the influx, how long will it take before the grit is entirely sanded away?
How many years before this raw working-class port city gentrifies completely, shedding its authentic edges to become the exact polished, exclusionary, and wildly expensive Riviera resort town that it currently stands in opposition to?
Keep exploring, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.